I'm not seeing or hearing anything. Oh, okay, thank you, Peter. Right, okay then. Thank you very much for coming along to this first meeting of the Planning Committee, being done virtually and also being live streamed on YouTube. So welcome everybody. Can I first of all, well, I've kind of done a roll call, and everybody that's listed on the committee is present. It may be that somebody drops out during this whatever. Hopefully that won't happen. But just before, well, in opening the meeting, can I also just ask all members and officers just to take a minute of remembrance, really, to remember Bill Olner, who was a previous MP, leader of this council and a councillor for many years, as well as the mayor of the borough. But alongside that, I know Bill would also want us to also remember all those people and families affected by the current COVID-19 situation. So if we could just take perhaps a minute for that. Thank you. Okay, thank you everybody. At this point as well, can I also, well personally anyway, take the opportunity to thank those officers that have helped me get through this. I'm a bit of a Luddite in regards to the new technologies, and it's been really helpful, and so thank you very much to all those concerned. Needed any help as well. Today's meeting is a normal planning applications committee meeting, and generally it will be conducted in the same way as we normally do. There's at least one slight difference, in as much as if there's been any representations made, we've had to change that slightly, so they've had to be written representations that will be read out. Clearly there won't be an opportunity to seek any points of clarification from what's been read out on somebody's behalf. Could I also just remind members that it's pretty important to click on the show hands thing. If you remember to wiggle your cursor over the centre of the screen, you'll see the bar come up, and you'll see the hand there. So if somebody wants to speak, they can click on that, and once you have finished speaking, click on it again to make sure the hand's removed. And also we seem to get some feedback sometimes if people leave their mute, but they're unmuted. So when you're not speaking, if you can put the unmute thing on, it's the same thing. There's a symbol there to mute or unmute. Right, and again, with anything that we take a vote on in this meeting, there doesn't appear to be a method of actually voting about putting your hand up. So what I will do is I'll do a roll call on that when we come to any vote. And just before we get onto the actual agenda, the last thing I'd want to say is, because this is new to, well, certainly new to me, and I know it's new to a lot of other people, myself and Philip would appreciate any feedback after the meeting so that we can look at any improvements we might need to make for the future. Right, okay, so we'll move on to the actual agenda. And item 1 doesn't really apply. I think we're all in places where we know how to get out of if we need to leave them. So item 2, apologies. As I said earlier, I've had apologies from Councillor Smith, and Councillor Croft is the substitute. Item 3 is to confirm the minutes of the meeting on the 10th of March. If you're not happy, just press the hand button, otherwise I'll assume people are happy with it. Okay, thank you. Item 4 is to receive any declarations of disclosable pecuniary and other interests in accordance with the members' code of conduct if it's not already listed in the agenda, or I think there was an addendum sent out as well. Okay, thank you. And similarly, item 5, declarations of contact, where anybody's been contacted by anyone about an application. I think all members have been sent something out today in regards to the Bulkington application, haven't they, Phil? Yeah. Oh, right. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the Bulkington application, as the applicant is Taylor Wimpey, I have had discussions with Taylor Wimpey about their development in my ward, but I want just to confirm I haven't had any discussions about the Bulkington application with them. Okay, thank you.
Just take I can do it, but if you take your hand off, Chris, Councillor Wilson, sorry. Thank you. Councillor Beaumont.
Chairman, I just want to say I've had several meetings with the developers over the previous year or two. They've always been very constructive, and it's only at this point, I think, that you could have indicated whether everything was satisfactory or not. So I haven't declared any made any pre-declaration about my support or otherwise for the application.
Okay, thank you. If you just take your hand off, John. That's it, thank you. Right, thank you very much. That then takes us on to the applications that we've got to deal with today. And the first one is Bedworth Road, Bulkington. Darren?
Thank you very much, Chair. I will just try and share my desktop with everyone. Just bear with me. Hopefully everybody can see that. Okay, this application is for full planning permission for 188 dwellings on land situated to the north of Bedworth Road, Bulkington. The site is located on the western edge of Bulkington and is bounded by the railway to the west and the existing residential estate with Severn Road to the east. To the north of the site is open fields. The site is currently vacant but was farmed in the recent past and measures approximately 6.37 hectares. The land is part of the strategic housing allocation in the borough plan, known as HSG8, which allocates land for housing along the west of Bulkington. The key issues to assess in the determination of this application are the principle of the development, affordable housing provision, residential amenity, visual amenity, highway safety, flooding, noise and air quality, landscape buffers, play and open space and ecology, and archaeology, along with any relevant planning obligations. In regard to the principle of development, the site comprises a part of the wider HSG8 strategic allocation in the borough plan, and indeed is the northernmost parcel of the entire allocation. The allocation provides for at least 485 dwellings, of which this application proposes 188. The adoption of the borough plan has taken place following a large amount of background research and consultation, and as such, the principle of the development here is somewhat established by the policy in the plan. The policy sets out a number of key development principles, or KDPs, which aim to help shape the development across the entire allocation. As members will have seen from the agenda, these KDPs are referenced later in the report. Overall, the principle of this site for residential purposes is deemed to be acceptable. The site proposes 25% of the dwellings to be affordable, which is in accordance with policy H2 of the plan. Discussions have taken place between the developers and MBBC Housing, and MBBC Housing are content with the proposed mix of the 25% being 74% affordable rented and 26% shared ownership. The development will therefore comply with policy H2, and it is proposed for these 47 affordable units to be pepper potted across the site into 7 groups. Here are the units spread across the site, as highlighted here. Officers consider this strikes a good balance between spreading the units across the site and keeping them within a maintainable distance for registered social landlords who may be adopting them in the future. In regard to residential amenity, the proposed site layout meets with the standards contained within the residential design guide. This is both inside the site and with existing residential properties. Any minor shortfalls within the site are mitigated by orientation, road placement, and other site circumstances. In regard to the proposal's impact on visual amenity, it is proposed to include open space, landscape buffers, and attenuation basins on the more exposed sides of the north of the site, the northwest and the southwest. This should help to soften the boundaries with the existing fields nearby. Additionally, the existing hedgerow to the east of the site near Mill Lane is to be retained. The design of the dwellings is to be a mixture of terraced, semi-detached and detached dwellings with some one-bedroom properties having the outward appearance of semi-detached houses. The materials are to be a mixture of red brick, render and some buff brick detailing. There will be both hipped and gable roofs across the scheme and a good amount of detailing to add interest to the facades. Here are a selected few of the house types proposed. As members will see, there is a good amount of detailing and a good mix of materials, including canopies, bow windows, soldier course headers and brick sills. Highways England and Warwickshire County Council Highways were both consulted on the scheme. Highways England had no objection, and the County Highways had no objection subject to some conditions and some planning obligations, which will be discussed later. Overall, there are no significant concerns over the proposal's impact on highway safety. The next key issue is the impact on flooding, drainage, contamination, noise and air quality. Warwickshire County Council Flood Risk, the Environment Agency and Severn Trent Water were all consulted and responded with no objections subject to the conditions. In relation to noise and contaminated land, the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council's Environmental Health team have no objections. Also, in regard to air quality, the Environmental Health Officer had no objections subject to some conditions. In regard to allotments on the site, the policy does ask for this. However, after consulting with Bulkington Allotment Association, they refused to take on 10 plots here as it would not be a big enough site to be maintainable. Instead, the applicant has agreed to pay an off-site contribution of £9,442 for Bulkington allotments, plus a design and management fee of £944. This is considered to be acceptable. Another part of the adopted policy asks for play provisions, which would be in the central part of the site allocation as a whole. This was found to not be practical, however, since some parts of the development, and indeed the entire allocation, could be lived in years before any provision is made, which would clearly be unacceptable. Instead, the applicant has agreed to provide a children's play area within the site, and this is in agreement with the Parks team. This will be included in a legal agreement and the details secured by conditions. In regard to ecology and biodiversity, a biodiversity impact assessment was submitted and scrutinised by the Parks team, and it was found that the site could be developed so as to have a net gain in biodiversity. It is therefore considered that the impact on open space and ecology is acceptable. Warwickshire Archaeology were consulted and asked for trial trenching to take place across the site. 32 trial trenches were dug in total on the site, and various finds were documented. Warwickshire Archaeology removed their objections subject to conditions following this works. As members will see from the agenda, the applicant has agreed to a number of contributions for various planning obligations, and these include contributions for the NHS, Bulkington Village Centre, George Eliot Hospital, sports and leisure, play and open space, library contributions, public transport contributions, including bus stops and enhancements, and pedestrian and highways improvements. These total just over a combined £1.69 million. In conclusion, therefore, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions and a legal agreement as detailed on the agenda.
Okay, all done, Darren?
Thank you, Chair. Yep, I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Philip, do you have anything to be read out from any objectives or comments or anything?
Yes, Chair, we've received two representations, one from the applicant, one from a local objector. So with your permission, Chair, I'll read the letter on behalf of the applicants first, followed by the objector.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Chair. So this is the first letter in support from the applicant. It's land north of Bedworth Road, Bulkington. Committee speech by Andy Williams of Advanced Land and Planning, who are agents, and Jane Smith of Taylor Wimpey, North Midlands. We're grateful to the Council for making the effort to hold this virtual meeting, which we are sure will be a learning curve for all concerned. Needless to say, we hope it goes well. We would like to thank your officers, and more specifically the case officer Jackie Padbury, for working with us proactively in accordance with Borough Plan Policy DS1. We very much appreciate her efforts to get this application into a form that hopefully you will find acceptable. The application site forms part of a larger allocation HSG8 on the west side of Bulkington that was specifically removed from the Greenbelt so as to deliver new homes in accordance with the new borough local plan. Its early delivery, therefore, forms an important element of the Council's 5-year housing land supply. In his report on the allocation, the inspector specifically confirmed that it would be possible for the application site to come forward separately from and in advance of other parts of the allocation. The local plan identifies a minimum requirement of 495 dwellings for HSG8. The proposal for the application site is very much in line with national planning policy aspirations. The proposed layout follows the format of a concept plan that was tabled at the local plan examination and also in the pre-application inquiry. Throughout the process, the proposals have been consistent and changed little in terms of the areas for open space and connectivity, the development area, and also the proposed number of dwellings. Following submission of the planning application, the applicants have responded constructively to comments received from the case officer and other key consultees in order to refine the proposals so as to make them acceptable in planning terms. In this respect, you will note that the revised proposals have attracted no objections from any of the external or internal consultees on any of the key issues, including highways, flood risk, drainage, open space recreation, leisure, ecology, trees, and network rail and the fire officer. Furthermore, as you'll see from the planning obligations section of the report, the applicant has agreed to each and every request that your officers consider to be SIL compliant. Consequently, contributions equating to nearly £1.75 million will be secured by the council either by means of a Section 106 agreement or planning conditions in order to mitigate any impact to the development in accordance with all relevant planning policies. As mentioned earlier, your officers have also worked extremely hard in increasingly difficult circumstances to ensure that the proposals can be presented to committee with a positive recommendation. The committee will be well aware that it is not possible to please all of the people all of the time, but we respectfully suggest that these proposals are entirely acceptable and they will deliver social, economic and environmental benefits in accordance with your development plan. Despite the difficult situation that the nation currently faces and the potential testing economic times that might follow, at least for a while, Taylor Wimpey remains committed to delivering the Council's allocation as soon as practicably possible. Therefore, having regard to the overall planning balance, we sincerely trust that the committee will now endorse a very clear recommendation to approve subject to the agreement based on the terms as outlined in the report. Chair, I'll stop there if that's 3 minutes.
Okay, it is about, yeah. Oh, I heard your thing going on. Okay. Yeah, you've got a second one, I believe.
I do, Chair. This is from an objection. It's an objection to the planning permission by John K. Jinks, who is the co-owner of adjacent farm Land in Mill Lane, Bulkington. If I can start, Chair. Number one, lack of transparency. According to NBBC's Guide to Making Views Known replanning applications, the first paragraph mentions, quote, normally those people directly adjoining the site will be consulted, unquote. I believe that this should imply transparency to the planning process. Unfortunately, this has not been the case with respect to today's planning application regarding our land registration number WK 409438. As owners of the adjacent land to the north edge of tonight's planning application, my sisters and I have been consistently ignored by the applicants and also by NBBC. This is in spite of the fact that although we have made contact with the owners, the agent and the applicants, Taylor Wimpey, Seabridge Development Limited and NBBC over various times in the last 3 years, they have been made aware of our existence, of which there is plenty of evidence, including the fact that we are not locally based. In April 2019, an access plan using bollards from Western Lane Mill Lane to our land was sent to us. We had a meeting with the TW Land Manager North Midlands in May 2019 in TW's Cannock offices. We verbally agreed to this offer. However, when this possibility was discussed in a meeting with neighbours and other parties, Councillor Smith including TW Land Manager in November 2019, we were not invited to the meeting. Number two, objections already submitted. On the 22nd of July 2018, we lodged objections to the inspector for consideration regarding his recent review. Quote, we are of the opinion that this modification is not legally compliant in that it prevents a legal right of access across the site to the land to the north. It is not sound in that it sterilises our land to the north. Our access to the Bedworth Road is registered in the land under consideration today, land registry number WK 369620. We require continued access to land for farming purposes. Also, a strategic green edge would preclude any form of future development to the north of this allocation, unquote. Number three, incorrect northern boundary. Also, we complained to NBBC Planning Department in April 2017 that this application, as shown in the concept plans for strategic allocations, HSG8 SPD, has an incorrect boundary to the north, which means the applicants are trespassing on our land. Number four, concept plan objections. The Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Plan April 2019 schedule of proposed main modifications reads, amend text as follows, quote, 24. Site will require a concept framework to ensure the parcels that make up the site come forward in a comprehensive and cohesive manner. Development proposals should be in accordance with the concept plan, including access arrangements, unquote. In spite of meetings with the Planning Policy and Economic Development Officer of NBBC over the last 2.5 years, we have never been informed of the planning application's recent amendments. NBBC and TW have had several public meetings with local property owners and have never involved us. Last sentence, Chair. It says the main current points of contention concerned with local plan policies referring to the SPD 2020 concept plans for HSG are as follows. If the planning application is approved today, our parcel of land to the north will become landlocked. We cannot understand how NBBC can knowingly give detailed permission to the application when it would infringe third-party rights. And that concludes the submissions from the public, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I've had what's termed a point of order from Councillor Wilson. It's not really something we have at Plan, it's more full council meetings. But if it's not something that can be dealt with under the debate, we'll hear what you have to say anyway, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question both to legal and for one of the councillors present. According to the schedule of declarations of interest, Councillor Beaumont is a board member of Bulkington Village Centre, and according to page 33 of our report, Bulkington Village Centre will receive £82,793.32. Does that form a disclosable pecuniary interest? Because the advice given to Councillor Smith, which is why he isn't present today, is that he could not participate, and therefore if the position is that Councillor Beaumont is still on Bulkington Village Centre as according to his schedule of interests, then surely the same position should apply to Councillor Beaumont. So can we have a ruling on that, please, Chair? Because it may mean that if Councillor Beaumont votes, then this application hasn't been considered legally, if that is the case. That's my concern.
Thank you. I understand your point. I'm going to ask Philip for his legal advice and whether he needs to advise Councillor Beaumont on it.
Well, obviously, Chair, it's for any individual member to make a determination as to whether they have a pecuniary or, in this case, it sounds more like to be a deemed pecuniary interest. So it would be for that for Councillor Beaumont to take a view. I think Councillor Wilson is right to point out that the code does say that if you are appointed to a board that is, so you're in part of the controlling mind, then you would be expected to have a deemed pecuniary interest. However, that is a matter purely for Councillor Beaumont to determine for himself. In terms of the legality of the decision, well, it might raise an issue of legality in terms that somebody may feel that Councillor Beaumont hasn't come at this with an open mind, but whether it then it renders the decision challengeable will depend upon really if it ends up as a finely balanced decision at the end of the day. And obviously that's a very difficult one to judge without knowing how members, we'll only know after the event when they've cast their vote. Clearly, if Councillor Beaumont wishes to take advice, he'll have to do that, but we won't be able to do that in the meeting. He'll have to decide what he wants to do now, and then take a view. Well, if he wants to have a chat outside of the meeting, we'll have to work out how we're going to do that.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think we've all heard carefully what's been said. Councillor Beaumont.
Thank you, Chair. I've been on the board of Bulkington Village Centre for many years, both as a delegate from Warwickshire and a delegate from Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council, which is what my current position is. I've never taken part in decisions of the board. I've been regarded as someone who represents the interests of Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council. And unlike Councillor Smith, I don't take part in that decision-making process. I do accept it might be deemed to be, but quite frankly, I represent the Borough Council's interest, and I've been treated as such by the board since I've been on there recently. They have had several changes to their articles of association, and I think it has made a difference to the way they involve me in their decision making. I'm not on any of the operating committees of the board, and as I say, I'm treated in that way as an ex officio almost, and I don't take part in their decisions as such. I'm there to offer advice and express, certainly from my long-term presence on the board. I've been there for 25 years. I was on the original steering group, and as a county councillor saw it come into existence, negotiating in many ways on the board's behalf. But in the latter years, I have just represented Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council. Now, I consider in those circumstances that I don't have a pecuniary interest in the outcome of this. If this was not extraordinary and I was no longer a member of that board, because I would not be a member of Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council, I wouldn't even be here today. So I think I'm quite in order in view of that record to take part in the decision making today. Thank you.
Okay. Can you just take your hand down, John, please? Councillor Beaumont. Thank you. Yeah, okay then. Well, it seems pretty clear that Councillor Beaumont doesn't feel the need to declare an interest, either pecuniary or non-pecuniary. And of course, that's a personal choice as advised by Philip. Okay then, so Councillor Beaumont, you wanted to come...
Sorry, Chairman, there is something I would want to emphasise, that Councillor Smith is an actual resident member of the board of the village centre, and as such he would be taking part in all those decision-making issues that I've been talking about.
Okay.
They're distinctly different in our responsibilities. Thank you.
I understand why you're telling us that, but this is purely down to you as a personal matter, what you want to do. Okay, thank you. Can you take your hand down, John, please? Sorry. I know I thought I could do it from here, but I can't see how to do it. Right, in which case we've had the presentation, we've had the comments. Can I, as chair, and to enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation which is printed on the agenda, which is the grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement and the conditions printed, and there's some amendments on the addendum as well. Is that seconded? If somebody just click on their hand button, if they second it. Anybody? Right, okay then. Right. Okay then, any member? Right. See, I thought these came up in order as they pressed them, but it doesn't seem to. I'll take them in the order as I can see them on here. Councillor Troman.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few points. First of all, first couple are actually just for the record. Can I just have clarification on why we had the representations read out? Is it because the people didn't want to join the meeting in a virtual way and read out their own speech, or is it that we've just told them that you can't do that and they have to submit it in writing? Just so I know for the record, one way or the other. Yeah,
well, I'll double check with Philip, but I'm
okay. Sure that was one thing. The other thing of a technical nature is actually, isn't this a showstopper? I mean,
Councillor Troman, let me deal with that one first.
Oh, okay.
In fairness, it's new to all of us.
Yeah.
And it's that, I think, that was the reason that people were going to submit things the day before and not be involved in college virtual, because obviously we didn't know who was going to come. But Philip, did you want to cover that, or?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, it takes a while to unmute. Obviously, when we were setting these meetings up, we were aware that there were a number of authorities that had blazed the trail and had some unfortunate issues in terms of security, and various meetings were, I suppose, trolled, for want of a better excuse. So I think we took a view that it would be safer and better to invite written submissions to start with, at least, and then perhaps take a view later on as to whether or not we could then resume public speaking in the way that we would normally do at a meeting in the committee room or in the chamber. So to answer the specific question, the written submissions, because that's what we ask people to do on the agenda, and obviously that's where we are at this present moment in time. But who knows, if we get a bit more savvy with the technology, we might be a bit more confident about taking it forward. I should say, Chair, that part of the reason for that is that the regulations that were brought in to allow for this sort of meeting make it explicitly clear that if a public participant, for whatever reason, technically either loses contact or can't be heard or can't do what they were hoping to do by this medium, it does actually prevent the meeting from carrying on. So it was very much about taking it in small steps. We need to be satisfied we can manage this before we start throwing it open to all the various different forms that members of the public may be using to come into these meetings.
Okay, thank you.
In a nutshell, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. And just to reassure members, I've made numerous comments about how we can keep our democracy within this meeting and engage with the public participation that certainly I fought hard to get. But okay, sorry, Councillor Trevors, your second point.
Yeah, so I've got three other points, a couple of which are quite minor, and they're to do with a general kind of dissatisfaction that I think we would all feel when you get applications come forward that are on a great big piece of farmers' land, and we're being told by officers, well, actually, they haven't met all the spatial distances and all the rest of it. They mostly have, but, the developer, there's a few bits where the line of sight isn't quite long enough and things like that. I think if they've got a virgin field to build on, we would expect developers to meet all of the criteria 100%, because it's not like there's buildings in the way or other constraints. But then there was also the objection letter read out, which seems to be a showstopper as far as I can see. I'm not sure how we can pass a plan that would be that overrides a right of way, and that would effectively, maroon this piece of land and leave it sterile. There'd be no way you could get the farm equipment to it, apparently, from what's being said. So if that's correct, I mean, I don't think we can proceed anyway, can we? And my final point I'll make now, if you like, or we can wait and see what Director Richardson says in respect of the legal element first. Whatever you prefer, Chair.
Well, you've got one more point. We may as well get that. And then
yeah, okay, I might raise that. Well, the final point is one of disappointment to be here, considering a large-scale application on HSG8, which, contentious to say the least, HSG8. So this isn't one of those sites where there's cross-party support, for it or whatever. Far from it. Yet we're having this come before us now, a year after the council voted for a wholesale review, an immediate review, an urgent review of the borough plan. And we've only had one meeting there, and that talked about something peripheral, like considering what extra gypsy and traveller spaces we need. Yet there's been a huge change in the last year, with Coventry's housing need maybe reducing very substantially. So a lot of the pressure on us to build on places like Bulkington seems to have gone away. If we'd used this last year to do what we promised the public and have the borough plan review, then actually this application may not need it to have come forward. And we may not need to be building in HSG8, but we don't know because we haven't done the borough plan review. So I don't think I'll be the only member that's pretty disappointed that we haven't made more progress with the borough plan review. And I hope, Chair, that that's something that you can help to move along.
Well, I'll try and address that in as much as this is a planning applications committee, a committee that will base its decisions primarily on the local plan. This committee doesn't formulate the local plan as such. That's done by others and then full council. And let's try and stick to the application in front of us. I'm going to bring Darren in on a couple of things, but in regards to the comments that were made by the objector about boundaries and stuff. That's a bit like a neighbour dispute, really. I would have thought, but Darren will tell me if I'm wrong, is that that's something, even if the application was successful, if people are going to have differences about boundaries and whatever, that will be for them to resolve. And then your first comment was in regards to distances between properties and that.
Yeah, the general planning stuff.
So, Darren, are you able just to respond to those, please?
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. Yeah, thanks for bringing me in there. Just to deal with them in order, the first point regarding distance standards, the residential design guide, it is a guide and it's used flexibly essentially, and it does allow for that. So where there is mitigation, for example, site levels, or often there'll be a road in between properties, and then if there's a road in between, then the distance standards can be shorter, and that's in the design guide. So although the agenda made reference to shortfalls, that it does comply with the distance standards in that regard, because that flexibility is built into the guide. Secondly, you're quite right, Councillor Hancock's rights of ownership, ownership of land, rights of access, none of those are considerations of a planning application. They wouldn't be grounds for refusal, and there would be separate legal civil matters that would have to be taken up at a later stage.
Okay, and sorry, just so that that I'm absolutely clear, this application site is one that is allocated within the local plan for this type of use.
Correct. Yes, it's part of HSG 8, which is split over 3 sites on the west of Bulkington. This is the most northerly parcel of that entire allocation.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Watkins. Councillor Watkins?
Yeah, Mia. Sorry, it takes a while to get the mute off. Yeah, mine is, I have brought this up before. It's about the, I realise that we haven't had any objections from Warwickshire County Council, but it was brought up at the borough plan stage that there would not be any more estates of this sort of size, with just one road in and one way out. And yet we've got another one here with one way in, one way out. So somebody clarify that that is in the borough plan, please.
Right. I will ask Darren about that, but I'm a bit confused because under the local plan thing, we wouldn't have any sort of design of any land. It's just a land allocation. Darren?
Yeah, again, Councillor Hancock, you're correct in that. Obviously, the borough plan allocates sites in a very general way for specific uses. It's the concept plans that come forward at a later stage, which often define the development more so. Obviously, we have a detailed application in front of us. I certainly don't recall any specific policy which doesn't allow single access development sites. And obviously we have consulted with the county council and they would assess the interior layout as well, because it's all adoptable roads, and there's no objection on those grounds. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Watkins, if you can click on your hand thing again.
Yeah.
Right, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a query regarding the concept plan for HSG 8, because I know that it states in here that has no weight yet, but I wanted to know from officers what the matters of divergence were between the planning application and what is put in HSG 8. In the concept plan for HSG 8, because I might want to raise something depending on what the answer is on that point, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Is that for you, Darren, again, or? Who's going to respond to that?
Hello. Sorry, Chair. I was trying to unmute there, but it wouldn't work.
All right.
I'm just bear with me. I'm just going to try and bring up the concept plan so we can all have a look at that. If you just bear with me a second, okay?
Okay.
Okay, I'll just come back and try and share my desktop. Just sorry, just bear with. Ooh. Okay, you should be able to hopefully see that. As you can see, the concept plans are for the entire site and they're split into three. The application in question relates to this most northerly parcel. Obviously, it's although it's got more detail than the borough plan, it is quite vague in terms of it's more to do with land uses. So it shows residential in the centre with open space leeways around the edge and proposed allotments. Now, they're not proposing the on-site allotments, as we've said, they're proposing money for that as well, off-site. And also some of the proposed formal open space will now be used on this one. But Councillor Wilson hit the nail on the head really by saying that it carries little weight at the moment because of the stage it's at.
Right.
Can I come back on that, please, Chair?
Yeah, just hang on 1 second, Councillor Wilson. So I just want to be clear, Darren. You said the concept plan had little weight in regards to this application. So does that mean you're happy that the planning application can still be considered as we are now?
Yeah, that's right, Chair. The concept plan forms or will form when it gathers more weight. It would form part of the assessment, but and part of the planning balance. But because it has so little weight, any real divergence from it wouldn't at this stage be a reason for refusal, given how little weight it's got and how at the stage of progress it's at is quite minimal.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson, you wanted to come back in?
Yes, please, Chair. I don't think that's really fair, because if you take COVID aside, all things being equal, we would have approved the SPD documents at full council in April, so that they would form part of what we consider for planning. I accept that these are unusual circumstances, but surely in these circumstances we should defer, in my view, this application until after the next full council, when the SPDs can be put into place. I believe there is a full council scheduled for July. If the developer wishes to appeal, let him, because if the planning inspector is anything like where I'm working at the moment, they won't get to that appeal before July, because most public sector areas are experiencing backlogs. And I don't think it is fair that residents who took the time and trouble to respond to a consultation of this council will effectively have their views ignored, and some of the protections put in place by the concept plan, if they are there, should be there for the residents. Bulkington was put in at the very last possible second in the borough plan process, and I think they deserve better than this, and I don't think COVID should be used as an excuse to get away from what they should be entitled to. So I will move, Chair, an amendment that this be deferred until after the July full council, pending the approval of the SPDs, and that the officers then reassess the planning application in light of the approved concept plan. That's what I will move, Chair.
Happy.
I'll second.
Who said that? Councillor Grant?
Yeah.
Did you say you were seconding it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Now, obviously that's been moved and seconded, and that'll come before the application thing. I've heard the advice from the planning officer saying we could still determine the application, the concept thing wouldn't be detrimental to that. But you also mentioned about a meeting scheduled for full council in July. I don't know whether that is going ahead or cancelled or not. Bill, have we got anything on that? Are we planning that that's going to go ahead?
Sorry, Chad. Again, trying to unmute. We are hoping to deliver the full council programme of meetings as per the meeting schedule for the remainder of the year, assuming the technology is up to it. But as you say, we that's the plan. But if anything changes between then and now, we obviously it may not happen. But that's certainly our intention at this stage.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sargent. I'm sorry, Councillor Sargent. I'm going to ask people if they want to speak on this part of it now about deferring the matter until after next full council. Councillor Sargent, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'll just the same as Councillor Wilson, just a little bit concerned that there's something in the pipeline that may get overlooked. And the other thing is obviously I can't believe that it could be a plan could be agreed without access to somebody else's land. You can literally just build something in front of somebody else's land and not negotiate access. So yeah, I would agree with Councillor Wilson that it should be deferred.
Okay, well, planning laws are a strange thing that other people, Councillor Gran.
Sorry, wouldn't let me unmute. I'm here now.
Yeah.
I agree with everything that Councillor Wilson has raised. I feel that there's going to be a massive hit on demand for housing with the international situation as it is. It's not just our economy, it's a worldwide economy. You've got freedom of movement coming to an end. You've got a lot of different things that weren't even factors when the Borough Council approved the Borough Plan. We've been promised a review for over a year. I couldn't in good conscience vote for a housing development this large, knowing that the site might not even be built on, because when you do that and it gets approved, even if it doesn't get built on in those 5 years that it's got permission, it still sets a precedent for future. And, well, things could be very different a few years from now as well. So I wouldn't want to impact on decisions that we could be making a long way down the line.
Well, we'd never make a decision on anything then because we don't know about the future. But I'll remind people we're dealing with a planning application here and not the local plan. Obviously, it's linked. Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the point of deferring it until after next full council, as has just been said, and I'll be guided by Philip Richardson, who's the legal advice, or even Darren. We have an application in front of us. if we defer, because there may or may not be a meeting in July of full council that will put through some other policies that can impact on this development. I've just got a nasty, sneaky feeling if they go to the inspectors, and I hear what Christopher Wilson says about, the planning inspector's not likely to even look at it until after the July meeting. But if we made a decision to do that, and then the inspectorate looked at it after the July meeting, do you honestly think he's going to come to a different decision? I think we're in hot water by doing this. The application's in front of us, and I just want to hear from the legal people and Darren how we would stand if we took a decision in the way that this amendment's been put forward.
Right, thanks, Ian. Philip or Darren?
Thank you, Chair. I'll
Sorry,
say
Phil.
press the button. I see him lurking. Difficult to answer that one. It will depend. It will depend on whether or not the applicants decide to lodge an appeal for non-determination. Clearly, they could wait until July, and we could see where we are then. If they did lodge an appeal, and I'm going to ask Darren to come in at a point just to clarify this, but my understanding would be that if they appealed for non-determination and we then subsequently considered the application, we could find that we're at a point where we may be able to bring it back to committee for a reconsideration, but that would be dependent upon the applicant doing a second submission if they'd lodged their appeal. Alternatively, we could find that we come to the situation that Ian has described, which is that we're at appeal and the inspector will look at it and say, well, what's the difference now between what was before you in May and what's before me now, other than the fact that you've now got a concept plan which doesn't alter anything in his view. So, and that may well then lead to applications against the council potentially if the inspector thinks that we've acted unreasonably in not making the determination. But it's a very difficult one to call. I'm just going to ask Darren if he wants to add something into that mix from his perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Yeah, so as soon as an applicant appeals against non-determination, we are then not the determining authority, the inspectorate is. And while we could bring it back to committee after they've appealed against non-determination, all we'd be doing is making a recommendation to the inspectorate then on what the council would have done. And that would form the basis of our appeal statement, essentially, whether or not we think it should be approved. Then it would be reliant on the applicant resubmitting to us another application, which we could then determine if things got to that stage. But yeah, as Phil said, it's a difficult one. It's up to members to determine. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And that's my main concern is if an applicant on whatever application goes for non-determination, we don't know what the thinking of the government is or the inspectorate in this current time. And I've always been of the mind that we should be making our decisions and being accountable to the people that elect us and not an inspector. Councillor Longdon.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry about that. I lost my power. I had to go and find a power lead to plug into. Just before I lost that, I was getting a bit concerned because we seem to be using some technicalities tied up with the borough plan so that we don't have to deal with this application. And this application is not going away. It will be there all the time, and we have to deal with it. And the technicalities that are being raised really are on the margins and for the officers to deal with anyway. So it's not down to us as a planning committee to determine whether or not we can use the borough plan to actually defer this or actually reject it. And we get crucified, I think. The matters have been heard. It says so in the report. It was heard by the inspector of the borough plan, and he chose not to do anything about it. And that's what it says in the report, and that's what it says in the submission from the applicant that was complaining or lodging the complaint. I think it was about 55, I think, on the list. And that's one of the complaints that said they're being ignored. So, I mean, it's not really anything this committee can deal with as such in that sort of light, and try and use things like that to defer or to refuse. So I suggest that we just get on and I'll move the vote, Chair, because I'm getting a bit tired now of listening to these arguments because they're quite spurious.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Longden. We're still at the moment discussing about whether it's going to be deferred or not.
I'm sorry, Chair, it's like wheel tappers and chunters in here.
Okay, Councillor,
putting in that.
If you take your hand down, Harry. Councillor Beaumont.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
So we're all playing with the mute button nowadays. I mean, I must say, I think these arguments about deferment are very, very thin. When the officer talked about the concept document, he then talked about allotments and children's play areas, and this is a split site, and there will be problems with the main road running across. And it strikes me that the developer has been very flexible in finding a way of meeting the needs of the people of that site, the future residents, by working with the Allotment Association in Bulkington and creating some children's play space in a particular area of the site. So I think everything's been done to meet the needs of the concept plan, but not in the way in which the concept plan saw it being met. So that flexibility for me would strengthen the case of any appeal which these developers would make. I think you are exposing the Borough Council to hefty fines, because if these people who have been very patient up to now, as far as I can see, events have got in the way of them progressing this application for quite some time now. And I think there is only a certain point at which patience snaps, and it's going to cost the Borough Council a fair bit of cash. So I would certainly vote against any idea of deferment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're kind of going around the raking a bit with this now. And I wasn't intending to bring anybody back in that hadn't already spoken, but Councillor Wilson, if it's something just briefly, because I want to get to the point of us deciding whether we're going to defer it or not before we haven't actually discussed the application as such. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. If I remember rightly from the inspector's report, most of the ideas of concept plans throughout the borough plan were as a direct result of recommendations from the inspector at the inspection of the borough plan, where he said on a lot of the housing sites, Whitestone and I believe Bulkington included, said that he recommended quite strongly to have concept plans. So what is the point in the inspector recommending something if we ignore it from having those concept plans? Also, what is the point in having a consultation on those concept plans if we're not going to use them? and deliberately ignore them. And then finally, Chair, if there is a problem with having a full council in July, there are other means the council can investigate to get those SPDs in place, whether that be through a single cabinet member decision, or, I'm not a big fan of them, but I know they've been used a lot lately, but the directors using their emergency powers. Because as we move forward, more and more planning applications will come forward without the concept plans in place, which is what the inspector said, that we should be having these concept plans. I think it is a matter of fairness to all involved, and that includes, but primarily, the residents. And I don't think we're being fair if we ignore the principle of a concept plan that they have been consulted on. I don't think it's unfair to expect the developer to wait another 2 or 3 months while we're going through COVID to get these policies in place, which would have been there if it hadn't have been for coronavirus. So I think councillors are depriving residents of their voice if they don't.
Okay, councillor. Right. What we've got in front of us at the moment, it's been moved and seconded that we defer this application until after the July meeting of the full council. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually do a roll call, a bit like when we do a recorded vote, yeah? So I don't know how this will work, but we might all want to unmute because of the time it takes to do that. So, Councillor Beaumont, for or against the deferment?
Against.
Councillor Graham?
For.
Myself, for. Councillor Troman?
For.
Councillor Lloyd?
Against.
Councillor Longden?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Pandare?
For.
Councillor Rudkin? Councillor Rudkin?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Sargent?
For.
Councillor Shepherd?
For.
Sorry?
For.
Councillor Croft?
For.
Councillor Watkins?
Against.
Councillor Wilson?
For.
Okay, so Phil, have you got the same figures as me? I've got 8, 4 and 5 against.
Yes, Chair. That the amendment was passed. That becomes the substantive motion.
Yeah.
Technically, you have to take a second vote on that, but I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, no, we'll do it right. That obviously becomes a substantive motion. Right, I'm going to go through it. I'll go through it again for that. Councillor Beaumont. Councillor Beaumont. For or against the deferment?
Against.
Councillor Grant.
For.
Myself. Against. Councillor Troman.
For.
Councillor Lloyd.
Against.
Councillor Longden.
Against.
Councillor Pandare.
For.
Councillor Rudkin.
Against.
Councillor Sargent.
For.
Councillor Shepherd.
For.
Councillor Croft.
For.
Councillor Watkins.
Against.
And Councillor Wilson.
4.
Okay, thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so you agree with me that's 7 for and 6 against?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, so that item is now deferred until after the July full council meeting when the concept thing is dealt with. Right, that takes us on to the second item at Ribbon Brook, Nuneaton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just sharing my desktop. Just
Okay.
Thanks. Right. Thank you, Chair. This application proposes to fell the lime tree known as T2 of Tree Preservation Order 1197. The tree is located in the rear garden of number 6 Ribbon Brook. The tree in question is a large lime tree and can be seen from some of the surrounding public areas and the street side of 6 Ribbon Brook. The application is being reported to committee at the request of Councillor Jean Tandy. The only key issue to consider here is the contribution the tree makes to visual amenity. The tree is situated in the rear garden of 6 Ribbon Brook, close to the boundary with number 5. To the rear of the site is an embankment and then the railway line. The Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council tree officer was consulted with this application and he objects to the felling of the tree. The tree officer has stated that there has been no compelling evidence that the tree is diseased or susceptible to breakage. He has also stated that the views of the tree from the surroundings, including the park to the south of the site, are important. The tree officer considered that the removal of the tree in question would lead to a significant detriment and discordance to the street scene it appears within and to the surrounding areas. Officers considered that there would be significant loss to amenity as a result of the loss of this tree. The recommendation is therefore one of refusal as detailed on the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thanks, Darren. Philip, do you have anything to read out from anybody?
No, Chair, there's been no representations received on this item.
Okay, thank you. Well, the recommendation is to refuse the tree works for the reasons as printed. To enable debate to take place, can I move that recommendation? Is that seconded? No?
Seconded. I thought you wanted us to raise our hands.
Yeah.
But, no, you did, not on my screen. Oh, sorry. Okay. Right, it's been moved and seconded. Does anybody want to speak on the item? Oh, I've got a list. Are these all people that have seconded it or want to speak?
I think they're all people that seconded it.
Right, okay. Councillor Sargent.
Yeah, I'll be voting against refusal simply because it's in somebody's back garden. The rear of the garden there's an embankment with a brook, and nobody can access that. The actual embankment has got trees and shrubs on it. How people can see it from the park and think that's some kind of amenity, I'm not sure, because you can see it above or slightly above the building. But you know, what amenity does anybody get out of a tree that's in somebody's back garden? I don't understand that. So I'll be voting against refusal, and would put down a motion that if it is refused, that we vote for it to be removed. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, we'll see how we've got. What I intend to do to be clear, is we will take a vote on the recommendation in front of us, and depending on that goes, is whether something else comes forward. Councillor Troman.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to echo what Councillor Sargent said. Anyone who goes up that, and I'm looking at it again on Google Maps here, anyone who goes up that road, and there's not many people that do because it's a little cul-de-sac, will see that there's this row of houses, and like you can see vaguely behind them there's some tops of some trees, but they're mainly from the embankment on the railway line behind. If you cut that tree out of the garden, nobody'd notice, and it's clearly causing a bit of a nuisance. It's clearly very large in a small modern back garden and causing some nuisance to the resident and also the neighbours. If you look at the actual report, there's been 2 or 3 of them that have said it's causing either damage or problems. And accordingly, other trees in the row have been removed from people's back gardens. So I don't like cutting down trees. I agree that we have TPOs. I've been the subject to those myself. Normally, if multiple trees are going, we'd expect them to put replacements in. But I think on this one, actually, you'd be doing the residents of that row a favour by letting this one be cut down. So, if anything, if somebody wants to second me, I'm happy to put forward a motion that we do allow it to be removed.
Well, I've just explained. I'll take a vote on what we've got here, and if that makes sense, somebody else can bring something else in. Councillor Beaumont.
I've just got to say, Chairman, I agree with the 2 speakers before. This is a tree that we've debated its near neighbours in the past and agreed to them being taken down. And then they got into a dispute with the parks people about whether they had a small ornamental tree or another whacking great tree the same size. So I fully support the removal and would do so for the other trees if they came forward. Thank you.
Oh, that might be a predetermination. Right, okay. I don't see anybody else. So the recommendation in front of us is to refuse the tree works. Again, I'll go through the list. I apologise if it's a bit long-winded, but it's a bit. I'm sorry, I was just going to do that. I've just seen that Barry had his hand up. Barry? Councillor Longdon?
I did, Chair. Sometimes it's slow, isn't it? Over the years, I've been a staunch defender of people's rights in their gardens to do what they like with their trees. And I've always been shouted down by this committee. Oh, no, you can't do that and all the rest of it. And now all of a sudden, people are not bothered about it. I don't know what's going on, but in that case, I'm going to abstain on this one because it's ridiculous. One rule for one and another rule for the other. We've seen all that, haven't we?
Right, I'm going to go to the vote. And this is in favour of refusing the works or against. Councillor Beaumont?
Against.
Councillor Graham?
Against.
Myself, for. Councillor Troman?
Against.
Councillor Lloyd?
For.
Councillor Longdon? Abstain. Councillor Pandare?
Against.
Councillor Rudkin?
Against.
Councillor Sargent?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Croft?
Against.
Councillor Watkins?
Against.
And Councillor Wilson?
Against.
Okay, I mean, actually, I've got to apologise. I kind of missed. Oh no, sorry, that's I'm confusing myself now. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 against, 4 for, and 1 abstention, which then I need somebody to move and second something else and give the reasons for it.
Council Chair indicated an intention to move a different motion if the recommendation fell.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. There must be one of those people that against the recommendation that wants to move something else.
Happy to do that, Chair.
Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, I'm coming there. All right. Yeah, I'd just like to recommend perhaps that we allow them to remove the tree, but to give the Borough Council a further 2 or 3 to plant in the local park.
Good idea.
Happy second.
We've just voted against that.
No, in the local park.
I think you can do that, Chair.
Well, I'm confused. The committee has voted against the recommendation, which is to refuse. Oh, right, to refuse the tree works, and they wanted to fell the tree.
Yeah. Good idea.
But now, sorry, is suggesting that they do remove the tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing.
That's not what you've just voted for.
I think what Councillor Watkins has tried to move, Chair, is that the tree be removed, but that the landowner plant 3 trees in the park instead. But as I say, I think from a legislation perspective, you can't do that. The legislation says you have to plant a replacement tree to replace the one in the location that the old one was removed, because the TPO was put on to preserve the amenity of the area, and the idea is that you would want to preserve the amenity of the area. If you're saying that you want the tree, a tree planting, then it has to go back where the tree you've just taken away has to go. So certainly members can certainly vote to allow the tree to be felled. There's no difficulty with that, but then you do need to decide, are you going to require a replacement tree in that location?
Yeah, I understand that. What I'm trying to say is that could have been the case by voting for the recommendation, but with an amendment to put a replacement species on that same site. But look, it's not for me to put words in people's mouths, because I voted a particular way. But what I'm getting the drift of certainly from what Chris is saying, doesn't sound like, and I'll ask Darren just to back it up, but I'm not sure we can ask for 3 replacements in a park. But it may be that if people want this tree removed, that we can ask the applicant to agree a species of tree to be planted in the same location.
The only thing with that, Chair, is that the last time that we did have one removed.
Who's that?
It's Councillor Sargent.
Yeah, just hang on, Councillor Sargent, please. I want to get the advice from Darren.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. As Phil said, obviously members can now move that the tree is allowed to be felled, and they can or cannot. They may or may not want to put a condition on there to replace trees. But in terms of getting them to replace trees off-site, that would be very difficult, unless out of the goodness of the applicant's heart they choose to do that. But it would be very difficult to make them do that through this application. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Let's just knock it down.
Right. Councillor Sargent.
Yeah. The last time a tree down the same road actually came up, it went the same way. So, but then nobody could agree what tree was replaced. So I would move or amend or whatever it is that the tree is removed or cut down, but no replacement is needed.
I'm sorry, somebody spoke in the back. I didn't get that last bit, Councillor Sargent.
The tree is removed, but no trees replaced. So it's just removed and without a replacement.
Yeah.
Right. Right. We've had one that's been moved to allow the removal and to ask for 3 to be put in a park. I think the officer advises that we can't really expect them to do that. We could ask, but we can't condition it. That wasn't seconded, not that I saw. And then we've just had one from Councillor Sargent to allow removal with no replacement. Is that what you were suggesting, Councillor Sargent?
Yeah, I think
Is that seconded?
I'll second
Yeah,
that.
I've raised my hand.
Right. Does anybody want to speak? Councillor Troman, is it speaking to that motion?
No, it was. I raised my hand to second it. That's all.
Oh, okay.
Put your hand down then. Oh, he's done it.
Right. Okay. So the motion we have in front of us now, which was moved and seconded, is to allow removal of the tree and no requirement for a replacement. We all clear on? Well, I keep asking questions. I don't want you to answer them really. Right, I'll do the same thing again. It's for the removal with no replacement, which is Councillor Beaumont.
In 4. Sorry.
Councillor Grant.
4.
Myself again. Councillor Bowman.
4.
Councillor Lloyd.
Against.
Councillor Longdon.
Abstain.
Councillor Pandare.
4.
Councillor Rutkin.
4.
Councillor Sargent.
4.
Councillor Shepherd.
4.
4.
4.
Councillor Smith. Sorry, Councillor Croft.
Yeah, at 4.
Councillor Watkins.
4.
Councillor Wilson.
4.
Okay, so that is carried, which I think was what was originally on the officer recommendation, but there you go. So that's 10, 2 and 1, Phil, yeah? Philip, yeah?
Yes, I get 10 2 1, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And we don't have any items of any other business. So can I thank you very much for your time and your patience and declare the meeting closed. Thank you. Good night all.
Thank you, Chair.
Good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Good night.
Thanks, Chair.
Good night.
Good night.